It was the year 260 AD, and Rome still believed itself eternal. For centuries, emperors had marched east, crushing Persian kings and burning their cities. To Romans, Persia wasn't a rival. It was a stage on which they proved their power. But that illusion was about to die, with the capture of Emperor Valerian, the only Roman ruler ever taken alive by an enemy. Before the humiliation came the arrogance. Valerian, already in his 60s, believed he could restore Rome's fading glory. His empire was bleeding, Germanic tribes tearing through the Rhine, plague decimating cities, and civil wars erupting like open wounds. But the East was his obsession. In 259, news reached Rome. Shapur I, the Persian king of kings, had invaded Syria, sacked Antioch, and paraded Roman prisoners as trophies. For Valerian, it wasn't just an insult, it was personal. He gathered a massive army, tens of thousands strong, determined to remind Persia who ruled the world. The march east began under omens no one wanted to see. Disease followed the legions, supplies vanished, and the Persians, masters of deception, lured Rome deeper and deeper into a desert that was not theirs to command. At first, victories seemed possible, minor towns retaken, rebels crushed. But Shapur was patient. He had studied Roman pride and waited for the perfect moment to make them pay for centuries of humiliation. Then came Edessa, a small city on the edge of Mesopotamia. Valerian set up camp there in 260 AD, believing he had cornered Shapur. But the truth was the opposite. The Persians had surrounded him. Thousands of Roman soldiers lay dying from plague, their camps choked with corpses and despair. When Shapur's army finally struck, it was less a battle than an execution. The Persian cavalry encircled Valerian's legions, crushing them in waves of iron and fire. As the dust settled, the impossible had happened. The Emperor of Rome himself was captured alive. No one in Roman history had ever seen such a thing. No one even believed it could happen. The empire that ruled the known world was about to watch its leader become a living symbol of defeat, not killed in battle, but paraded, shamed, and broken. Rome's nightmare had only just begun. When the dust of Edessa settled, the unthinkable became reality. The Emperor of Rome, Valerian himself, stood as a prisoner of the Persian king Shapur I. The man who commanded legions now stood surrounded by Persian guards, his armor stripped, his empire thousands of miles away, and his dignity hanging by a thread. For the Persians, this was more than victory. It was vengeance centuries in the making. Shapur had Valerian brought before him in chains, and what followed would echo through history as one of Rome's darkest humiliations. In Persian carvings etched into the cliffs of Naksh-i-Rustam, Shapur sits tall on his horse, calm, regal, untouchable, while Valerian kneels before him, hand outstretched, begging for mercy. That image wasn't symbolic. It was historical. The Persians made sure the world would never forget who had humbled Rome. The journey from battlefield to captivity was slow and deliberate, a procession of disgrace. Valerian, once surrounded by legions, was now surrounded by jeers. His soldiers, those who survived, were chained and dragged east, many sold into slavery to rebuild Persian cities. Shapur made them walk through the provinces they had once claimed as Roman territory, a living declaration that the empire's invincibility was a lie. In his capital at Gunda Shapur, Shapur made a cruel decision. Valerian was not to be executed. Death would have been too merciful, too quick. Instead, he would live, a trophy of humiliation, a daily reminder to the world that Persia had done what no nation had dared. Ancient sources disagree on what happened next, but all agree it was dehumanizing. Some claimed Valerian was kept in a gilded cage, paraded whenever foreign envoys arrived. Others told darker tales, that Shapur used him as a human footstool when mounting his horse, forcing the once mighty emperor to kneel beneath his boots. Whether myth or truth, these stories captured something deeper: Rome's pride, once limitless, now crushed under Persian sandals. Even Roman writers, desperate to deny the shame, could not hide their disgust. The empire had endured defeats before, but never like this. To them, Valerian's capture was not just a military loss. It was a cosmic punishment, a moment when the gods themselves seemed to abandon Rome. Meanwhile, in Persia, the propaganda machine thrived. Shapur minted coins celebrating his triumph, calling himself King of Kings who captured Valerian. In art and inscription, the message was clear. The East had risen, and the West had been broken. Rome's emperor was alive, but only as a warning, a living monument to arrogance, a breathing symbol of how far the mighty could fall. Back in Rome, news of Valerian's capture arrived like a plague wind. The Senate refused to believe it. Whispers turned into panic. An emperor, a Roman emperor, captured alive. Impossible, unthinkable. It was as if Jupiter himself had been dragged in chains before a foreign god. The empire entered a spiral of denial. Messages from the East were burned, eyewitnesses silenced, and for months officials claimed Valerian was merely negotiating with the Persians. But truth has a way of rotting beneath lies. When Persian merchants and envoys began spreading tales of Shapur's triumph, the horror could no longer be contained. Rome had to face the truth. Its emperor was a slave, and that was more devastating than any battle. The humiliation fractured the empire's already fragile heart. Valerian's son, Gallienus, now ruled alone. But his reign began under a cloud of shame so heavy it suffocated everything around it. Provinces in Gaul, Palmyra, and Egypt declared independence, claiming Rome was cursed. The legions, once loyal, began choosing their own generals as emperors. For the first time, the empire was no longer a single body. It was a corpse being devoured by its own limbs. Valerian's defeat was more than symbolic. It tore open every weakness the empire had tried to hide. The frontier defenses collapsed, trade routes crumbled, even faith faltered. Roman poets wrote that the gods had turned their faces away, disgusted by the empire's pride and corruption. And in taverns and markets, people whispered what officials feared to say out loud: that maybe the Persians had done what Rome deserved. Meanwhile, in Persia, Shapur's legend grew. Artists carved his victory into the rock at Bishapur, showing Valerian kneeling like a servant, his arm outstretched in surrender. It wasn't just a triumph. It was psychological warfare. Every merchant, every envoy, every visitor from the West saw the same message chiseled into stone. Rome bleeds too. Even centuries later, the shame remained so deep that Roman historians tried to rewrite it. They invented comforting fictions that Valerian had died heroically in battle, or that the Persians were lying. But the truth was carved into Persian cliffs for eternity. The mighty empire that had enslaved nations now saw its ruler enslaved. The conquerors had become the conquered, and in the deserts of Persia, Valerian still lived, broken, humiliated, and waiting for a death that refused to come. The last Roman emperor to see Valerian alive never spoke of his fate. Even the Persians, proud of their victory, preserved only fragments of his final years. But what the sources agree on is chilling. Valerian, the ruler of the greatest empire on earth, ended his life as a living humiliation, a breathing warning to all who defied the East. Shapur I kept him alive for years, a trophy of power and propaganda. Some said he was forced to serve as the king's footstool, kneeling so Shapur could step onto his horse. Others whispered that he was displayed before visiting ambassadors, a reminder that even Rome's emperor could be broken. The truth may lie somewhere between the extremes, but to Rome it didn't matter. The very idea of Valerian's suffering became legend, and that legend was poison. When Valerian finally died, the stories grew darker. Persian accounts claimed his body was flayed, his skin tanned and dyed red, then stuffed with straw and displayed in a Persian temple, in eternal mockery of imperial pride. Some said the skin hung in a Persian palace, others that it was sent around the provinces as a warning. Rome, of course, denied it, but denial could not erase what everyone already believed. The once divine ruler of the Roman world had been turned into a lifeless shell. For the Romans, it was not just one man's downfall. It was a spiritual collapse. The empire had always believed its emperors were chosen by the gods, but now the world had seen one kneel. Temples emptied, prophecies darkened. The myth of Roman invincibility cracked open, and from it poured an age of chaos that would last generations. And yet, in a strange way, Valerian's disgrace became the seed of something new. His son, Gallienus, reformed the army, rebuilt defenses, and even restored fragments of order. The empire did not die. Not yet. But it was never the same again. From that moment, every Roman emperor carried the ghost of Valerian behind him, a reminder of how quickly divinity can decay, how thin the line is between a throne and a chain. As for Shapur I, he became a legend in his own right. The man who humbled Rome, who dared to capture the uncatchable. His empire flourished briefly, its triumph carved forever into stone reliefs, showing him towering above Valerian's bowed head. Centuries later, the sands buried those carvings, but the story survived, whispered, rewritten, and revived again and again. Not because of Persia's victory, but because of what it revealed, that no empire, no matter how vast, can escape the slow humiliation of time. Valerian's capture wasn't just Rome's greatest embarrassment. It was the moment history turned and whispered its most brutal truth, that even the mighty must kneel,